we have discussed the negative effect of unemployment. Unemployment is bad. So it is not surprising that policymakers would want to keep it as low as possible. But the question here is how low is considered low? Well, the easiest answer is probably zero. But unfortunately, I'm just going to put it up front here. It is not possible, at least for an economy like the United States, it is not possible to have zero unemployment rate for the reason that we will discuss very shortly. So now we just put it up front. It's not zero. So how low is considered low enough? So ideally, policymakers would want to achieve what we call the natural rate of unemployment, natural unemployment rate. When an economy is at its full employment, the associated unemployment rate is the natural rate. So what is full employment? So one of the definitions of full employment is that when an economy is at its full employment, it is producing the maximum amount of resources, a maximum amount of goods and services, given the resources and technology it has. So what is natural unemployment rate then? It is the lowest unemployment rate compatible with price stability. This definition is probably not the easiest to understand. So let's look at an analogy. Let's look at let's draw an analogy between a factory and the economy. So we have a factory here that operates 8 hours a day. So workers work for 8 hours a day. So everybody is kind of in his comfort zone. Nobody is burning out. Nobody is burned out, and everybody is kind of comfortable. So we can view that as the full employment. So let's draw an analogy between this factory and the economy. So the economy now is at its full employment. So let's say for some reason, we don't know why, for some reasons, orders just keep pouring in. There's a lot of demand. So when orders keep pouring in, this factory finds it very hard to keep up with the orders with only an 8-hour shift. So what will the owner do? So if you were the owner of this factory, what would you do? One of the things that you might do is you are going to have your workers work overtime, right? So let's say you have your workers work 10 hours instead of 8 hours. Your workers now work for 10 hours. So obviously this is not free. You have to pay overtime. Okay? So there's higher cost there. So let's say that's still not enough. So orders just keep pouring in. So you keep extending the work hours of your workers. So 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours. At one point, the workers would say, no, I don't care how much you pay me. I'm not going to work anymore. Okay, this is just too much. So workers are burned out. So what the owner is likely to do is to go out there and hire new workers so that the factory can have more than one shift. So imagine all factories do that. And so, factory owners are out there to hire new workers. So what is likely to happen here is the labor pool gets very tight. So firms compete for workers. Okay? So we are now stretching beyond the full employment, which means we are straining the resources. So workers are burned out, and also firms are fighting for workers. So when firms are fighting for workers, what do you think they would do? So if you're out there trying to hire some qualified workers and you find it very hard to do that because other firms are competing for workers, so what do? You will bid up the wage. Okay? So when firms compete for workers, okay, they bid up the wage. So at the same time, you can see that the unemployment rate keeps coming down because the labor pool is very tight. So workers find it very easy to get a job. So the unemployment rate is below the natural rate, okay, as we stretch beyond the full employment. So a lot of you will say that, well, why is that not a good thing? It is a good thing, right? Okay. But when you think about it, when firms bid up wages, that means higher cost of production for them. Do you think firms will absorb all these high costs by themselves? Of course not, right? They are going to try to pass on to customers, okay, by raising the prices of goods and services they sell. So in other words, we're likely to see higher prices, and that is price instability. And when it gets out of control, that's not good for us, because we end up paying higher prices for goods and services. So that comes the answer. What would be how low is considered low enough? Well, policymakers would want to try to strike the balance in order to get a balance between unemployment and the prices. Okay? So we will try to strive for a natural rate of unemployment. So now let's come back to why unemployment rate cannot be zero. So in order to do that, we are going to talk about reasons of unemployment. So there are several reasons or several sources of unemployment, or you can call them categories of unemployment, different types of unemployment. First is seasonal unemployment. Okay, so seasonal unemployment, as the name suggests, it has something to do with seasonal factors. For example, in winter, the unemployment rate in construction sector tends to be high because construction work is hard to be done in cold weather. There are not a lot of jobs in that sector in the winter. On the other hand, in winter seasons in the United States is usually holiday seasons. Okay? So what that means is retailers tend to hire a lot more workers than usual. So the unemployment rate in retail sector tends to be low in the winter season. So that's seasonal factors. And also summer. The unemployment rate in the United States in the summer tends to be higher than usual. So what do you think why do you think that is the case? Well, students, right? Students look for jobs in summer, and there are not enough out there all of a sudden to accommodate the demand. So unemployment rate tends to be high in the summer. So all these are seasonal factors. They are not avoidable. They are always going to be there. So that's one reason why the unemployment rate cannot be zero. But because they are usually temporary and they are mild, so it's not something that policymakers would be concerned about. Another reason why unemployment rate cannot be zero is frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment. So frictional unemployment refers to brief periods of unemployment experienced by people moving between jobs or into the labor market. So frictional unemployment is caused by some of the frictions that are inherent in the system, in the institutions that we have. Take for example, so even with the technology today, with the technology today, we can send out hundreds of resumes with a few clicks. We can look up hundreds of job postings at once. Still, it takes us time to look up all these job postings to find out which ones we like, which one we think our qualifications may match, and so on and so forth. And then once we have found the jobs that we think we want to apply, we may want to customize our resume a little bit, because usually when you customize your resume according to the requirement or the need of the job descriptions, you stand a better chance to get an interview. So that would take a while. So once you do that, you send out the resumes. You probably want to wait for a few days at least to hear from the recruiters. Okay. Sometimes you get a job interview, you get a phone interview, and other times you get an on-site interview. Okay. When you are looking for a job in a large corporation, you tend to have to go to rounds and rounds of interviews. Okay. Because if they like you here, they may want to fly you out to the headquarters to have another round of interview. So that takes time. It all takes time. Sometimes weeks, sometimes months. Okay? And that is inevitable. That's part of the system. Okay? So that's inherent, that those are frictions that are inherent in the system. That is another reason why we can never have zero unemployment rate, because it's always going to be there. But it is temporary and it is mild, so it's not something that policymakers are too concerned about. And from the sound of it, you know that there is not a lot of sense of urgency there. There are jobs out there. It's just that people have to take time to move from one place to another, or they have to look it up. Another type of unemployment is structural unemployment. Another reason that we have unemployment is structural unemployment. It is the kind of unemployment caused by a mismatch between the skills, locations of job seekers, and the requirements or locations of available jobs. From this definition, you can hardly tell the difference between structural unemployment and frictional unemployment, because they sound very similar. But there are a few characteristics that distinguish structural unemployment from frictional unemployment. First, if it's a structural unemployment, it is caused by a structural change. It can be an economic structural change. It can be a technological change. It can be a cultural change. Okay? It can be a demographic change. But either way, this structural change is likely to be permanent. Or at the very least, it is highly unlikely to be reversed. It is not easily reversible. Okay? So take for example, long time ago, the United States was an agricultural economy. And then at the turn of 18th century, it transited into an industrial economy. So obviously, a lot of farmers lost their jobs. So there's this rise in unemployment. And it affects a lot of farmers. It's very severe. But you can see that there are other jobs that are being created here. There are new jobs in the factories. The problem is these farmers will not be able to take up those jobs in the factories very quickly. Because for one, it takes them a lot of time to change the mentality. A lot of these farmers, they have been farmers for generations. It is hard to imagine themselves doing something else. And also, it takes time to acquire the skills to become factory workers. It cannot happen overnight. It takes some time. So while there are new jobs out there, farmers remained unemployed for a long period of time. And is this going to change? Is this going to reverse? Are we going to go back to agricultural economy? It's highly unlikely. Okay, so that's one of the key characteristics of structural unemployment. And also another key characteristic of structural unemployment is that while jobs are being lost, there are new jobs being created, which is what we observed just now in the industrial revolutions. So farmers lost their jobs, but there are jobs out there. It's just that farmers cannot become factory workers because they haven't acquired the skills yet. Okay? So another feature that distinguishes structural unemployment from frictional unemployment is structural unemployment, if it's not dealt with, tends to be very, very severe. Okay, so unlike frictional unemployment, which is temporary and mild, structural unemployment can be there for a long, long time and can be very, very painful. Okay. So, last one, cyclical unemployment. This is a type of unemployment that policymakers usually have in mind when they talk to the media. So it's cyclical unemployment. That means it has something to do with business cycles. Business cycles or economic cycles refer to the fluctuations that we have in the economy. So sometimes the economy is doing very well. Corporations find it very easy to make profit, so they don't mind hiring more. So unemployment tends to be quite low. Consumers find it very easy to get a job, so they don't mind spending, and so on and so forth. So that's the peak. And then at one point, companies may find that they have overextended, they have hired way too many people, so they start to downsize. That's when things start to go downhill. So unemployment rate starts to climb up, okay, because businesses find that they are not doing so well. And then because household members find it very hard to get a job, so obviously they will not spend as much. So that feeds into this downward spiral. Businesses will find it even harder to get business, and then we go downhill all the way till we reach the trough, we reach the bottom. Okay? And then the unemployment rate tends to be very high at that point. Okay? And then firms find that, well, maybe now we are lean enough, so we can hire a couple more workers. So that's when the unemployment rate starts to come down. Okay? So in other words, cyclical unemployment is the kind of unemployment that is due to a lack of job vacancies, which in turn is due to an inadequate level of aggregate demand for goods and services.